Good evening. My name is DJ Ennis, and welcome to Vote Right for America. In episode 11, I covered the subject of abortion on demand, the problems with the Roe v. Wade decision, including the court's majority's hypocrisy on the 14th Amendment, and why egalitarian political economic groups like Democrats, Socialists, and Communists want and need legalized abortions to further their sick and wrong agenda. I also covered the general narrow-mindedness of abortion advocates on the subject. In this episode, I'm going over a remedial look at the United States Constitution with a focus on legislative powers. This means I'll browse through part of Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution and then take a look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of today's Congress. As you know, the unique characteristic of the government of the United States of America rests with a Constitution that provides a separation of government powers. Most schools tend to refer to them as the three branches of government: the legislative, the executive, and the judicial. The Constitution refers to them alternately as powers and branches, but initially they're referred to as powers. Our founding fathers knew the seriousness of what they were doing. They had risked charges of treason and the punishment of death for daring to stand up against the rule of a vindictive king of Great Britain. So when they penned the Constitution of the United States of America, the first words after the preamble many students may be able to recite are the words beginning in Article 1, Section 1 as, "All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives." Article 2, Section 1 begins with the words, "The executive power shall be vested in a President of the United States of America." Article 3, Section 1 begins with the words, "The judicial power of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as the Congress may from time to time ordain and establish." They were called powers because the Founding Fathers knew what the awesome aspects of government were. They didn't want a government that abused its citizens, but wanted one that had internal checks and balances to prevent any abuses onto its citizens. Thomas Jefferson, one of the Founding Fathers, the author of the Declaration of Independence, and later the third President of the United States, stated, "A wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from injuring one another, shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their own pursuits of industry and improvement, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. This is the sum of good government." That's right. Our Founding Fathers were not like democratic socialists. They believed in equality, but it was the equality in opportunity, not equality in result like I addressed in episode 6. They didn't champion an egalitarian political economic philosophy-driven government, but a free market limited government concept. They weren't backwards, they were forward-looking. They weren't control freakish like our progressive friends. They stood for liberty, and with that, they didn't want a government that tried to be all that controlling. Now let's take a look at Congress more closely. Congress is a bicameral legislature. There's a House of Representatives that's described in Article 1, Section 2, and a Senate as described in Article 1, Section 3. Congress has limited the number of representatives to 435 members. These representatives come from districts that are apportioned throughout the United States based on the decennial census. As I've said in episode 9, it's a constitutional requirement to complete the census, so your state can be properly represented in the House of Representatives. Each member of the House of Representatives has a 2-year term. In the House of Representatives, there are currently 6 non-voting people. There is a resident commissioner of Puerto Rico who has a 4-year term. And there is 1 delegate each from the territories of American Samoa, the U.S. Virgin Islands, Guam, and the Northern Mariana Islands, as well as 1 for our nation's capital, the District of Columbia. Each of these delegates have 2-year terms as if were representatives. They can only enter in discussions in the House, but they're non-voting members. According to the 1830 Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek, the Choctaw Nation was allowed to have a non-voting delegate in the House. But the Choctaws have not acted on that part of the treaty. The Cherokee Nation, by virtue of the 1835 Treaty of New Echota, was allowed to have a non-voting delegate in the House. On August 25, 2019, the Cherokee Nation officially designated Kimberly Teehee as a delegate for that tribal nation. The House of Representatives has not acted on approving her as recognized delegate at this time. Article 1, Section 5 of the Constitution states that each House shall be the judge of the elections, returns, and qualifications of its own members. That's why even though Ms. Teehee has been chosen as the Cherokee Nation's delegate, the House members have to officially act on accepting her as a qualified delegate to properly seat her. Each state has 2 6-year termed senators. Basically, each state, at the minimum, will have 2 senators and 1 member of the House of Representatives. Currently, there are 7 states that only have 1 representative and they require 2 senators. Prior to the ratification of the 17th Amendment in 1913, senators were chosen by each state's governors and confirmed by each state's legislature when a senator's term had ended or there was a vacancy. This was in accordance with Article 2, Section 3. The 17th Amendment changed all that, and now they are directly elected. Each state decides what to do when there is an untimely vacancy. The 17th Amendment allowed each state to decide whether a governor can appoint a senator or call a special election. The 116th Congress, which was seated on January 3, 2019, is probably the worst Congress I've seen in my life. The hatred, the vitriol, the utter contempt toward President Trump by the new Democratic majority in the House of Representatives is sickening for me to watch. The political posturing and the early declaration from the more radical members of the new class of House Democrats to impeach Trump indicates the intolerance that group has, not only for Donald Trump, but for the Americans who fortunately put him in the office to end their power grab, to drain the swamp that had been going on throughout the Obama administration. There was the Russian collusion delusion that was investigated, and the Mueller report findings didn't have any smoking gun to conclude any Trump-Russia conspiracies to interfere with the 2016 elections. Then there was the committee hearings in 6 different House committees, continuing their vain attempt to find Russian conspiracy connections. And then there was the investigation regarding the July 25th 2019 phone call between President Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, where Trump told him, "There's a lot of talk about Biden's son, that Biden stopped the prosecution, and a lot of people want to find out about that. So whatever you can do with the Attorney General would be great." Biden went around bragging that he stopped the prosecution, so if you can look into it, it sounds horrible to me. He was referring to the now presumptive Democratic Party presidential nominee, Joe Biden, who bragged about having a Ukrainian prosecutor fired by a previous corrupt Ukrainian administration.
I'll give you one concrete example. I was, not but it just happened to be that was the assignment I got. I got all the good ones. So I got Ukraine. I remember going over convincing our team, or others too, convincing us that we should be providing for loan guarantees. And I went over for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, "No," I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, "You have no authority. You're not the president." The president said. I said, "Call him." I said, "I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion." I said, "You're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here." And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, "I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money." Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
After the House Democrats claimed this was an abuse of power because the president dared to request the Ukrainians to launch an investigation into one that was stopped because Joe Biden coerced the Ukrainian leadership, an act of abuse of power, House Democrats launched impeachment investigations in their committees but changed the rules so that Trump's attorneys could not be part of those proceedings to ask their questions of the sworn witnesses, as was the practice during the Clinton administration. They came up with 2 weak articles of impeachments that went nowhere in the Senate, not because Republicans make up the majority of the Senate, but because the House Democrats realized too late that they didn't have a case to cause a conviction and removal of a president like they hoped. We have a corrupt, decidedly out-of-touch leftist group of people in the House of Representatives. They have rallied somewhat, but tepidly, to increase the Small Business Administration's budget for the new CARES Act programs during this COVID-19 pandemic. They continue to take cheap shots, like they're the mainstream news media, at Trump and his administration's handling of this crisis, as if these Cassandras could do any better. A lot of these House Democrats are or plan to be career politicians, sanctimoniously devoting their lives to public service, all for the betterment of humankind. What a crock. They do this because it's a better way to make some money and develop connections that will further any political aspirations they have. Government is their life because of their horrid political economic philosophy. They believe government should be your life too. House Democrats still won't rein in government costs, still won't secure our borders, still won't even come close to balancing the budget, and still won't cut social programs, even though most of them are designed for government dependency, not financial independence. Let's face it, career politicians, especially the Democrat kind, are killing our republic, and too many Democrats who hold public office don't have any real-world experiences. They really do need to do something different. They spend their life in government. Most have never owned a business, never made payroll for someone else, yet they have no problem telling you how to run your business. We need to limit the number of terms all members of Congress serve. We need to ratify a constitutional amendment to do just that. I propose a constitutional amendment, and I'd like to call it the Coburn Amendment, in honor of Dr. Tom Coburn of Oklahoma, who served 3 terms in the House of Representatives and after a 4-year break ran and became a U.S. Senator. Dr. Coburn recently passed away. He was in the middle of his 2nd term when he resigned his seat in the Senate because of his ongoing battle with his cancers. He wrote a book in 2003 called Breach of Trust: How Washington Turns Outsiders into Insiders, where he identified what the average person doesn't know happens in Congress. In his book, he presented his idea to limit members of the House of Representatives to 3 terms and the members of the Senate to 2. Under such a constitutional amendment, if a person served 3 terms in the House and then served 2 Senate terms, he would serve a total of only 18 years in public office. That's long enough. We could get rid of exorbitant congressional pensions, and members of the House and Senate may actually work for their constituents rather than be unduly influenced by Washington insiders to stay in office and enrich themselves on the public dole. We need changes in D.C. It needs to begin with getting rid of Democrat members in Congress. You are watching Vote Right for America. Please subscribe to this vlog. It's free, and you can also email me with your comments and questions at vrfa.djennis@gmail.com. And please comment. I'll use your comments and questions to clear up matters and concerns you have in the future episodes. Good evening.